want to move on to the next point, which is the crucial point. Human resources. For in order for the capitalist core to produce its goods and services, it needs to mould human resources as well as utilise natural resources. And just before my career began, American economist called Schutz wrote an article in which he said that economists have always shied away from using the term human resources. And he wrote, "Our values and beliefs might inhibit us from looking upon human beings as capital goods, except in slavery. We are not unaffected by the long struggling society on indentured service and to evolve political and legal institutions to keep men free from bondage. These are achievements we prize highly. Hence, to treat human beings as wealth that can be augmented by investment runs counter to deeply held values." Schutz's misgivings are ones that I feel we still need to consider. It was Immanuel Kant, over 200 years ago, who said human beings should always be treated as ends and never as means. But perhaps only when we build this city of God or city of man will people cease to be means. We have had forced employment, slavery, etc. over the years. And we have learned to use the least powerful, in fact, for other people's ends. City of Man might have been that place where people learn to dwell in freedom. But we need to live together, as the Delors report suggested. And so the human being, if we are going to be used, has to be used to produce the goods and services of the core. People have to be made into workers, often knowledge workers, as technology takes over many of the more mundane and manual tasks of work. But even this apparently advantageous move raises questions that need more careful discussion than I think we have time for now. But there is a sense in which we are depersonalizing people if we see them only as resources. But you see, if we think about the knowledge underlying the type of society we live in, and the knowledge that we also teach, Kerr and his colleagues warned us in that quotation with which I opened this talk, that the dominant knowledge would be scientific and technological. Nicky Stair, in his book on the Knowledge Society, pointed out that the learning society doesn't use the whole spectrum of knowledge, only the scientific and technological end of it. And I saw this in my own career, because in the economic crisis at the start of the 1980s, higher education was cut back. And the first two departments in my own university to be closed at that time were the departments of philosophy and the departments of home economics. For they were deemed dispensable in the time of economic cutbacks. Later, we also lost the education department as another one that was dispensable. And other universities in the West have done some similar things, curtailing departments that are not using practical knowledge or not making profit. Lyotard, for instance, suggested that higher learning will have to continue to supply the social system with the skill fulfilling society's own needs, which centre on maintaining cohesion. In the context of delegitimation, universities and institutions of higher learning are called upon to create skills and are no longer ideals. So many doctors, so many teachers in a given discipline, so many engineers, so many administrators. You see, the transmission of knowledge in universities is no longer designed to train an elite capable of guiding a nation towards its emancipation, but to supply the system with players capable of acceptably fulfilling their roles. Further and higher education, then, has changed. And what's changed is the speed with which knowledge is changing. 100 years ago, Max Scheler talked about the positive knowledge of mathematics and natural sciences and the technological knowledge that change every hour, he said then. And he called them artificial because they were changing so quickly. And it's the global core that needs that artificial knowledge. And so universities are encouraged to research, both the universities and other companies and corporations are also encouraged to do research. And there's been considerable pressure on universities to do that. But the core needs an educated workforce. And so we've had professionalisation. The substructures always need a ready supply of educated workers. And so the occupational structure changed in the 70s with an increase of so many more knowledge workers and with the nature of the universities. Occupations regarded as semi-professions began to professionalise, seeking to establish themselves within a university context. And so we saw the growth of universities teaching practical knowledge. And so they continued to not to train an elite, but supplying the system with players. But it's not just a highly educated workforce that the system needs. But the point is, by the time this would happen, education, we ask the question, is it a right or is it a privilege or is it a purchase? And the real issue here is that we all know about the human right of education, but what happens when universities expand at the rate that they are? And at first we can say, wonderful, it's giving so many other people who would never have the opportunity a chance to go into universities. But you see, in Britain, we had this wonderful hope that because of the professionalisation, 50% of our young people will go into a higher education. And education then became a commodity, just like any other commodity. And the trouble was the state couldn't afford to have 50% of its young people going into higher education. So it introduced fees. Now, £9,000 a year is the basic fee for any student in the higher education system, which means all that hope of having those poorer people come into higher education goes, because we've expanded education to meet the needs of the technological world. But universities themselves are now acting like entrepreneurial corporations with different campuses throughout the world. But then, and I will have to bring my talk to a close now because I know I'm going over time. We used to have a saying in Britain, 10 years ago, a degree gets out of date in 10 years. 5 years ago, it took only 5 years. 3 years ago, it was 3 years. Now, the knowledge you learn in your first year at university is out of date by the time you get to your last. And so, what we had was practitioners coming back to universities in their droves. And we got continuing and recurrent education with master's degrees